For my 20th century project, I researched Al Capone, possibly America's most famous gangster. Capone's background. Al Capone's full name was Alphonse Gabriel Capone, and he was born in 1899 in Brooklyn, New York. His parents were Italian immigrants named Gabriel and Teresa. His father, Gabriel, was a barber. His mother was a seamstress. He had 8 siblings, and they all grew up with an average life for an immigrant family. Nobody would have suspected he would become such a notorious gangster. He was a good student in his Catholic school until he began to fall behind and had to repeat 6th grade. At that point, he began to skip school and hang around the wrong crowd. Capone was soon expelled for hitting one of his teachers. Soon, his family moved into a nicer house in the Park Slope neighborhood of Brooklyn. In the new neighborhood, Capone found odd jobs at bowling alleys and candy stores and also met his future mob mentor, Johnny Torrio. From then on, his life was never the same. The biggest events in Capone's life. After meeting Johnny Torrio, Capone started to become involved in gangs. Torrio even became the godfather to Capone's baby boy, Albert Francis. After Capone's father's death, he moved to Chicago to follow Torrio, where they got in the business of gambling, prostitution, and bootlegging, which means to sell illicit goods like liquor because the 18th Amendment prohibited it. Soon, they began to commit worse acts like murder. This all happened during the Prohibition era. In 1924, a mayor election threatened their operations, so they shot and killed some voters as an intimidation act to ensure the right person was elected. While his illegal liquor trade was booming, if establishments refused to buy his liquor, their establishments were blown up. As many as 100 people were killed in these bombings from Capone. The most known event, though, was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929. At the time, Capone's longtime rival was Bugs Moran. Capone and his hitmen posed as police and assassinated 7 of his rival's men in cold blood. From that day, Capone was dubbed Public Enemy Number 1 in Chicago. Today, when people think of Chicago, gangs, violence, and unsafe will come to mind. Nobody wants to raise a family in downtown Chicago. Al Capone is the one who put that stigma on Chicago, and it is still there today. Capone ran such a big operation that he had political and law enforcement connections. Because of that, long after Capone left Chicago, gangsters still ran their operations basically in peace. In the end, Capone would die of cardiac arrest in Miami with his wife in 1947. The law enforcement could never get him on murder, so he was eventually sent to prison on 22 counts of income tax evasion. The federal government sent him to Alcatraz. He left behind a legacy, and his life would be captured over and over again through inspired movies and books. Fun facts about Capone. Al Capone was also known as Scarface, and it is because a man slashed him across the face when he made a remark about the man's sister. Ironically, the same man would hire him later. Another thing people don't know is while Capone was working as a bouncer in Chicago, he contracted syphilis and never got treated. Or did you know the first time he was arrested was because he was driving drunk and hit a parked taxi cab? Capone was really also known for the lavish lifestyle he lived. He had $1 million revenue coming in every year, with his booming businesses making a pretty good life for him. And probably the coolest thing I learned about him is that he had a custom bulletproof Cadillac built. The government seized the car and sent it to D.C. for President Roosevelt to drive around in. Alright, here is a short video to recap my presentation. Alright, here is a couple of my favorite pictures of Al Capone, and thank you for listening.